Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and today we're taking a look back at the wide receiver position. We're going to talk about the hits, the misses. We're going to talk about things that we've learned and some resolutions for the new year regarding that position. And to help me do all of that are two very dear friends of mine. Andrew Erickson, Mr. Big Pot Energy, a little under the weather, but it doesn't matter. He's here. He's soldiering through it. He's a tough guy. And Scott Bogman, whose hair continues to grow here on the YouTube channel if you're watching at an alarming rate. I don't know where or when you joined one of the gangs in West Side Story, Bogman, but I got to tell you, I like the look. It's we're getting some finger snapping. Could be a musical number.
No musical. I'm going to grow it out again. So this is the beginning of that, the pre-donation, all of that stuff. But I like to this level of hair, I like to couple with the beard. I don't want to be shaving the beard off with this.
You did Locks for Love a couple years ago, right? Is that
no. Wigs for Kids. Locks of Love.
Wigs for Kids.
Yeah, they charge for the wigs.
Oh,
still.
really?
So,
well,
yeah.
I thought maybe it would be nice. You can grow it a little extra for me and I could wear it on the show.
You know what? We can work out a price separately away, and we can definitely work something out. Whatever you want, pigtails, whatever. So,
Erickson, cold medicine kicking in. You ready to talk some wide receivers with me today, my friend?
Always ready to talk wide receivers. Bring it.
There you go. There we go. Let's do it. The cream of the crop, too. Wide receivers, where fantasy points lives. I was in 2 expert league finals, and I had Justin Jefferson. My opponent had Jamar Chase. It's not a coincidence, folks. It's the future. It's where fantasy is. And it's what we have to start talking about and taking more seriously is that wide receiver position early on. So before we go ahead too much in the future, let's talk about the present because it's very fresh. The wide receiver takeaways, the things that we learned from this year. Erickson, why don't you kick us off here and talk about one of the things that you learned this year about the wide receiver position?
I think when we're looking at the top tier wide receivers, they're still always attached to top tier quarterbacks, especially ones that are accurate with the football. So that's kind of something that you want to keep in mind. When you just look at the top 12 wide receivers in terms of finish this season, weeks 1 through 17, the only one that I would classify as like being on a bad offense or having a bad quarterback was Amari Cooper. He was one of the things I got really wrong this year. I didn't want any part to do with him because he had Brissett. And even when he got Deshaun Watson back, Deshaun Watson wasn't good. So the fact that Cooper was still able to be a top 12 wide receiver at the end of the day, obviously playing all the games, that helped him. But still, like, he was super productive all season long. It was a big miss by me. But at the same time, when you follow a formula, again, there are going to be outliers every single year.
Of course.
But of the other 11 guys, you're going to look up and down the board and say, oh, yeah, they all had accurate quarterbacks. They all played on good offenses. And that's why they were all top 12 wide receivers. Whereas when you get into the 12 between 24, the guys that kind of stood out, McLaurin and DJ Moore, finish as 18th and 20th respectively. And then this is where they finish every single year, is in this mid wide receiver 2 range, because we all know they're very talented players, but they're always held back by quarterback play. That's why it's always a roller coaster with these guys, because they have these big weeks when the quarterback play is good. And then you have Sam Darnold throw for 45 yards and DJ Moore is doing nothing, which is why, of course, because Sam Darnold threw for 45 yards in a game. Like, of course, DJ Moore is not going to do anything. So I think that's still with the top tier guys. You have to have that top tier quarterback, especially one that is accurate with the football. That's something I'm going to look into a little bit more deeper in my off-season research. Is not just like labeling quarterbacks, so good quarterback, bad quarterback. Labeling quarterback says, okay, is this guy accurate? Because that's something I didn't dive into deep enough, I think, and that's why I missed on Geno Smith. Geno Smith, even when he played last year for Seattle, was accurate. And that made a big difference with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, obviously carrying over a lot of value in drafts after basically they're being left for dead.
I'm going to give you a hall pass here, Erickson, because I think the miscalculation was more about maybe the Cleveland Browns defense being better this year than they were, because they certainly were not at many times this year. So I think that was also the sheer volume of Amari Cooper almost couldn't be stopped sometimes. And the fact that he'd have a lot of fighting for target share, and Njoku having injuries, right? And some other, just lesser wide receiver play. So I think I'll give you a pass. I think you're too hard on yourself, but it's a good point nonetheless. Good quarterbacks, good wide receivers. The ecosystem returns yet again into the conversation. Good ecosystems. That's what you want to invest in. Scott Bogman, let's invest in you a little bit. Some time. Give me one of your takeaways from the wide receiver position.
Yeah, it's that the top 8 are really a tier of their own. And I'm talking about the guys in the top 8 points scored per game. Kupp, Jefferson, Hill, Devontae, Diggs, Chase, Lamb, AJ Brown. That is just a tier that is so much better than pretty much everybody else. I mean, I think there's a big tier 2 as well, but I have been a guy that has been the opposite of what Joe said. Traditionally, I am taking running backs early because, like Erickson made the point, every wide receiver is connected to a quarterback, no matter how good they are. They're connected to a quarterback. Running back is really the offensive line. Most offensive lines are good enough to run block. Even the Falcons did it this year. So, you have less to depend on. Plus, volume is king in fantasy football. And we know most running backs that are taken at the top get just a massive amount of volume. But those top 8 guys are as safe as it get for fantasy football players, not just for, wide receivers as a position. For fantasy football players, those guys are as safe as they get. And there's going to be more wide receivers in the mix in the first round this year because of the success of these guys at the top end. So I'm with you guys. Wide receivers are getting safer every single year.
Mm-hmm. Safer, more productive.
Did you mention St. Brown? Did you mention Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I did not. And I look, talent wise, he is amazing. He is.
I think you made
great.
Erickson.
I think he's in that top tier.
Oh, okay, he might be, but we'll okay, hold on.
Didn't you hear this? Was there a stat last night where he had more first downs than any other wide receiver last year, or more third down conversions?
You guys relax and not jump on me because we're going to talk about Jameson Williams a little bit later, and I'm very, very excited about Jameson Williams.
The dynasty host in you is coming out early today. I like that.
Of course.
All right. Well, more on some of those guys later. Another great thing besides the Dynasty podcast that Bogman hosts, which is coming back in January with Pat Fitzmaurice. It's also the Daily Juice, 15 minutes of incredible betting content with our own guy hosting it every single day. Sean Green, just he's a machine, that man. He's possibly more machine than man, but incredible work he does there, whether it's college football, college basketball, NBA, you name it, the NFL playoffs. He's got 15 minutes of content for you every single day. So you can go out there and make your wagers accordingly. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. You could also check it out at bettingpros.com/dailyjuice because you got to like the juice. Every morning I have some juice, a little tea, coffee, depends on the day, and some daily juice there. Erickson, back to you. Give me another takeaway for you from the wide receiver position in 2022.
You want to buy top tier wide receiver 2 talent on a roster, despite the argument of lack of targets, because I think the lack of targets argument is just, it got nuked this year. Like, it's just not a good argument to make, especially with some of these wide receivers that are coming out of the draft, these rookie wide receivers. There's just so much talent coming out that if you are talented and you're on the field, like, you're going to get the ball one way or another. And it doesn't matter who necessarily else is on the field as well. So prime examples, Devontae Smith. He was a top 10 wide receiver. He was right next to AJ Brown. AJ Brown was wide receiver 4, and Devontae Smith was still wide receiver 10. Jaylen Waddle, he had Tyreek Hill. Did that stop him from being a wide receiver 1? No. Tyler Lockett scored more points than DK Metcalf. I mean, he was going outside the top 40.
I was going to say,
receiver in the league.
Who's the one?
A 3 or 4 week stretch. It was unbelievable with Lockett.
Yeah.
So
there's no doubt about that.
There's just prime examples of, and these guys were all values on draft day because they had an alpha next to them that was being drafted ahead of them. And there will always be a window to buy these players because no one's going to draft Devontae Smith over AJ Brown. It's just not going to happen, which means there's always going to be a buffer between the two guys being drafted. Now, we got it right with guys like a T. Higgins. Like, he was ranked accurately as a top 20 guy, like, heading into the year. And that's kind of where he ended up finishing. But he wasn't valued like these other guys were. Like Smith, like Waddle, like Tyler Lockett, even guys like Mike Williams, wide receiver 20 in points per game. Ayuk, wide receiver 22 in points per game. Chris Godwin, wide receiver 20 in points per game as well. So these wide receiver 2s, again, in these offensive ecosystems that are favorable, are hitting and giving you great value along with some upside with even being wide receiver 1s. We see it all the time. I remember we had a show where we talked about, teams that support 2 wide receiver 1s. Well, those were the teams, the Eagles, the Dolphins, the Bengals, and the Seahawks. So it happens a lot. So it's like worth taking bets on, hey, is this guy talented? He's a wide receiver 2 on his team. Take the bet on him in the 6th and 7th round. It's usually going to pay off. I
like it. I could not agree more with you. And I think going into next year, we have to readjust our brains, number twos who are getting a lot of action are certainly worth investing in. Speaking of number two, what's your second thing here, Scott Bogman? I'm not calling you a number two. It's just your second thing.
Big
number
old pile of number two right here, Bogman.
Right.
So,
okay.
Thanks, Joe. Look, this second tier of wide receivers, I think, is gigantic. Maybe it's a third tier because there are guys that, like Erickson mentioned, that maybe you don't put in that upper super elite category, but they're right there. Amon-Ra, Devontae, T. Higgins, Jaylen Waddle. Those guys are like just outside that top 8 tier to me, but are still very, very good. So maybe it's like the third tier of wide receivers, but it is so deep and it's hard to suss out between guys like Metcalf and Lockett and Cooper and Judy and Pittman and Mike Williams in there. Terry McLaurin, you mentioned before, Ayuk, Olave. Where do we put Deebo now after a bad year? Christian Kirk, DJ Moore. We're going to get Calvin Ridley back. Like, we're going to have this rookie class coming in.
Zay Jones had such a credible season that nobody saw coming.
Unbelievably well.
Zay Jones' finish was incredible. Kirk was so consistent all year. When you add in Ridley, and if they bring back Evan Ingram into the fold, because he was on a 1-year deal, a lot of people don't realize that. If they bring him back, I mean, look, it's a great situation for Trevor Lawrence to have so many weapons, but it does make investing in them a little trickier.
It does, but also the tier is so big that I think, in that second round, I'm probably going to be looking for, whatever wide receiver falls of that top tier, or Kelsey or Andrews. Kelsey probably firmly in the top of the first round at this point, but Andrews maybe Pitts as well. I know a lot of people are going to be off of Pitts, so maybe not in the second, but I'm going to invest earlier in a tight end than I ever have, because this second group of maybe third group, like I said, of wide receivers is so deep. I'm going to be investing in a tight end. That's kind of my takeaway.
It's a great argument. Early. It's a great argument for that. And it's something you and I have already discussed too, a little preeminently. We talked about,
this is after shows. We've been talking after shows.
People don't realize this. We talk about football before the show, then we do the show. And then we talk about football again after the show for a good 15, 20 minutes sometimes.
We're all going to cry about the Steelers and Patriots for 15 minutes after the show. So,
well, I mean, not me. I want better draft picks. Not that they'll know what to do with them, but whatever. But
they're going to draft someone from a school we've never heard of. What do you expect?
Well, any guys from Bemidji State coming out this year? I'm not sure.
Fine. Well, we'll take all the, I'll take a defensive tackle from Bemidji State, but just don't draft any offensive players, please, in the first round. They have no idea what they're doing. But to your point, we talked about, I believe that Travis Kelce going in the top 5 makes more sense than him going in 10, 11, 12, which I think is more where he's going to go. But I think you can support the early tight end the earlier you take one, because you're going to back him up right away with 2 other players that are in the top 25 potentially.
Very curious to see what RPV says about Kelce. Is he worth last year, players?
88% better than that's what I did the
that was last year.
Value. For this past season, he was 88% more productive than the league average tight end one. Not tight end, just the tight end ones, the top 12 guys. 88% more productive. It's the biggest number I've ever seen. The only one close to that was 2 years ago. McCaffrey was, I think, 81 or 82. It was close to that. Ooh. 88, never seen that before. It's just terrible. All right, Erickson, back to you. Let's close it out here. Any other wide receiver takeaways from the 2022 season?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, when receivers step up, when other guys get hurt, I think that needs to be held in a higher regard. The main argument against St. Brown a lot of the time going into the season was, he only did it because Swift and Hawkinson got hurt. Oh, what do you know what happened?
No,
Swift wasn't healthy.
So annoying last year. I hated that argument.
Didn't even finish the year on the team. So it doesn't matter. So when guys step up, when guys get hurt, we need to remember that and be like, they did it and they delivered, because not everyone does that. Guys get hurt all the time and the backups come in and then they suck and they don't do anything. So players like a Brandon Ayuk, the fact that Ayuk did step up when Deebo missed time, that's a remembered reason. You shouldn't just automatically rank Deebo ahead of Brandon Ayuk going into 2023. Ayuk was been better. He's been more consistent over the last 2 years, and healthier, in my opinion. So
let's be honest. The health of Deebo Samuel for the bulk of his career has not been there.
And another guy, Marquise Brown. Look, Marquise Brown was wide receiver 6 through the first 6 weeks of the season. Then DeAndre Hopkins came back. And that's going to be the argument against Marquise Brown. It's Kyler's hurt, and Marquise Brown only did everything when Hopkins was missing games. It's okay, yeah, but he was wide receiver 6 when he was healthy on the field with Kyler Murray. So Marquise Brown, I imagine, is probably going to be someone that not a lot of people are going to be high on because of the injury to Murray, because of Hopkins coming back, et cetera, et cetera. But all we did see last year is when he was on the field with Kyler Murray, he was delivering a wide receiver one like performance. So
Erickson throwing a different offense now too. People are going to knock Marquise Brown because whoever they bring in will not be an air raid Cliff Kingsbury type of guy for sure.
Yeah.
So
plus we have to wait for Kyler Murray to come back and see how healthy he's going to be. I mean, let's not pretend like that's easy to come back from either. It wasn't just the ACL, if memory serves here. He had some other damage in that knee. So it's a big deal, especially for a guy who's a mobile quarterback.
Even shorter too. That's a big question.
Hey, easy on the short guys. I don't like that.
I'm not knocking short guys. I just everybody likes to talk about how short he is.
But I want to say, kudos to our little crew here, because I remember on a lot of those mock draft shows, Erickson, that we did, you, me, Bogman, Deebo, all of us. At a certain point in August, that whole argument for Amon-Ra St. Brown or against him, we just said enough is enough. Like, he's falling too far in these drafts and this consensus. And we all started drafting him like a wide receiver too, because he was going as a wide receiver 3 most of the time. It was kind of absurd.
Well, another knock on him too, Joe, was, what happens when Jameson Williams comes back and all that stuff, because Williams was a very high pick. But I mean, come on, this is something that maybe it's just experience helps us know, but it's
corners too. I mean, how much have we talked about that in the IDP show? We love those slot corners that get the tackles who aren't any good, because all day long, they're just going to target, and they're just going to get 10 tackles just trying to stop somebody. But going into next year, how does Jameson Williams, because you kind of teased it, how does he, or is that something you want to save for even later?
I want to save that for a little bit later, but that I'm just throwing that in on as another knock against Amon-Ra St. Brown, kind of like with like we're going to see with Marquise Brown. There's so many negative factors that look from the outside in that look like they're going to be a huge detriment to his production, but he's still going to be he's still a very, very talented wide receiver is the point, and he's still going to get plenty of targets.
Erickson, before I go back to Boggs, was there any other takeaways at the wide receiver position from 2022 for you?
I think it's just important to remember that when in doubt, if you're like torn on two different players, like really try to gravitate more towards the player that you actually think is better in a vacuum. Like this year, I think I'm really going to start my rankings out with actually just ranking the wide receivers in terms of how I think they are in real life, and then moving them based on what team they play for, what quarterback, what's their environment around them, because every one that I got wrong is because I missed on, I've judged the situation wrong. Like when we do the big hits and misses, like that's going to be the theme. It's going to be like, oh yeah, it messed up the situation. I drafted an inferior receiver who I knew was not as talented as this other guy, but I liked the situation more. And I turned out either the situation was not how I thought it was going to be, or the player just didn't take advantage of the opportunities he got, because what do you know? They're not that good. So that burned me.
Is the poster, or should I say, are the poster children for that scenario Allen Lazard and Christian Watson, right? Probably should have taken Watson, the better talent theoretically. They put draft capital into him. Although Green Bay has a history of getting that wrong, clearly on paper, a more talented wide receiver than Allen Lazard. And for a run there, certainly made a huge impact. Is that the kind of situation you're talking about?
I think so. And it becomes complicated because there are portions of the season where Lazard was like useful, like during the beginning of the year when Watson was hurt. So it's like, you can't say like, oh, drafting Lazard was like the worst thing you could have done, but ultimately,
no. But you could say Christian Watson drafting was better, because he impacted more weeks on a bigger scale. I think at the end of the day, we're trying to win every single week. That's what it's about. Boggs, any other recaps here before we move on to the next segment here?
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore and Kansas City don't necessarily need wide receiver number ones. Was a big thing because, Deebo and I got in the fight about Juju versus Sky Moore, and
he did dye his beard pink.
I saw it. Oh yeah. He sent me. I won that bet it to for be, sure. But I mean, rostering Juju didn't feel like a win this year, because everything went to Kelsey. It was better investment than Sky Moore for sure, but just not a very good one. And we keep trying to make Rashad Bateman happen. When Devin Duvernay was playing well, everyone wanted to make Devin Duvernay happen. They just don't need that wide receiver one. It's Andrews and Kelsey and the run game. Jerick McKinnon had 9 receiving touchdowns. We're not going to take those 9 and give them to Juju or Sky Moore or whoever.
Someone will this offseason. Someone will.
Well, for sure, but it's just not the smart thing to do. So
someone will.
Like Erickson said, rely on talent. Tyreek Hill got all those catches because he was talented, not because he was the number one in a system. He's
well,
an
and how worried were people
receiver.
about Tyreek Hill? I mean, that's another one too. You know, and we saw this happen a couple years ago when DeAndre Hopkins moved on, right? People were like, "Oh, well."
There are a couple guys that are QB proof, and those are two guys.
And I think Tyreek Hill was QB proof. DeAndre Hopkins, who was still in his prime, but now is clearly past it, another year older. That's a thing you got to remember. If you are a super talent like a Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins has proven it time and time again, even with good quarterback play.
AJ Brown is the most QB proof wide receiver I've ever seen in my life. Ryan Tannehill and Jalen Hurts. He's sending to the Pro Bowl and winning MVPs over here. Like, I mean, come on. These are not good quarterbacks throwing the ball down the field, and he has turned them into absolute Pro Bowlers and top tier quarterbacks. So AJ Brown is definitely one of those guys.
Yeah, and I like how you kind of touched on guys like Bateman and guys in bad situations potentially also.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, Moore, London, Bateman, Woods, Sutton, Mooney, all with bad quarterbacks. It's a thing that it goes back to what Erickson was talking about and what we opened this with. It is these are guys on teams with quarterbacks that played. They just either had a bad year or they're not good, so it's tough to take those guys who are more talented above guys that are less so with great quarterbacks, so that's another, just thing you throw in with that second, third tier, whatever you want to call it, that makes it more difficult to rank these guys for next season is how much do these quarterbacks improve and how much can they improve? Because I love Treylon Burks and I think Robert Woods got a raw deal this year, but are they getting better? Is Malik Willis going to get that shot? I don't know if that gets better. I don't know how that's going to work out. There's a lot of QB situations too. We talked about last year being the biggest year of quarterback movement heading into the offseason. So it's going to change everything. And it did. And this year, that supply and demand might be worse. Like I don't know how we're going to get out of it because some of those guys you thought were going to be okay and just steady, like the Matt Ryans of the world, they were not. That's for sure. All right. So that puts a little bit of a button on some of the things we learned, which is good. We like to always sit back and try to take in, hold ourselves accountable. But let's hold ourselves accountable here with some hits and misses. Let's start with the hits. Let's be positive first. Erickson, give me the couple guys that you were big time in on that hit for you that you were very proud of yourself.
Well, we just talked about him, AJ Brown. I was not, hesitant at all. I thought it was a massive upgrade with him going to Philadelphia because I just thought they would throw the ball more. Like it didn't even matter how accurate Jalen Hurts was with the football. It was like he's going to an offense that's not going to rank 30th or 31st or 32nd in terms of passing attempts per game. And we've seen the Eagles at times this year totally disabandon the run game and just chuck the ball downfield to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Like you can only have two guys finish as top 10 wide receivers if you're throwing at least an above league average rate, which is what we saw from the Philadelphia Eagles. So AJ Brown, we knew he was super talented, and then he finally got more volume with the move to Philadelphia. So I was really happy about AJ Brown. I had him as a top 5 receiver, and he finished as wide receiver 4. So I was happy about that. And then a guy that you could get later in drafts, Christian Kirk for the Jaguars. Now, I know he kind of fizzled out a little bit towards the end of the year. Zay Jones obviously had a bunch of big games. I know Kirk actually had a strong Week 18 game that obviously didn't count for most fantasy leagues. But Christian Kirk was going outside the top 36 wide receivers. He was a wide receiver 3 for most of the games. And going back to the year before in Arizona, he was a fringe wide receiver 1 when DeAndre Hopkins missed games. And just nobody was putting 2 and 2 together, which is why we have to make sure we factor this stuff in. When guys miss time and other players step up, like don't hold that against them. Use it as a reason to draft them because it's football. People get hurt all the time. And you want to know and have the confidence that, hey, if this guy has a bigger role, which based on the amount of money that he got in free agency, you could assume, okay, Christian Kirk's probably going to have a sizable role in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense that is ascending with a new head coach, with a quarterback that we know can throw the ball accurately. I'm not surprised Christian Kirk finished as a top 15 wide receiver. I think, he's wide receiver 14 overall, wide receiver 22 overall in points per game. He was top 10 in red zone targets. So, unfortunately, I don't think Christian Kirk's going to be able to repeat this with Calvin Ridley coming back next year, but I still think he'll end up probably being another value because he's still going to be the slot receiver there. So maybe not be a top 15 guy, but probably still a wide receiver 2 that'll probably end up being a good value because, again, he's a top tier wide receiver 2 on an offense we want parts of.
Well, and Calvin Ridley hasn't played football for a whole year, too. We don't know how that's going to impact. He is an older guy, too, in terms of age. I think a little older than people realize. Not
Joe, are you saying he's a gamble? Is that what you're saying?
I see what you did there. Very nice. Well done. That's why I like having you around.
That's for you. That's for you.
Fun.
That's a dad joke for you.
I love it. It's a dad joke. You know what? And you always, on the BP show, when Bogman and I do BP every week, you're always poo-pooing my dad jokes, rolling your eyes.
That's why I said that one was for you.
I know, and I appreciate it. It's about time.
Easy.
It's about time you got on board. Fun fact here about A.J. Brown. Wide receiver 5, he finished. Stephon Diggs finished at wide receiver 4. He did it with more than 20 less receptions than Stephon Diggs. So 84 receptions for A.J. Brown, 103 for Stephon Diggs. Diggs had 1,351 yards. A.J. Brown had 1,401 yards. More yards with 20 plus.
Diggs is getting ball down the field to put into his hands by Josh Allen, and A.J. Brown is over there catching wobblers from Hurts.
He just wakes up and rips off 80-yard touchdown runs.
But I mean,
I know. I watched him against the Steelers.
And if you ask me next year, who would I rather have? I don't hesitate. I'm going to say A.J. Brown.
And it's wide receiver 1 season.
It is, and I'll tell you this much too. It's zero hesitation because of that statistic right there. I want the guys that can create their own. I think that's very important, especially as you saw I don't want to say decline of Stephon Diggs, but it's another year older. I thought it was very curious that they gave him the extension and how much money they gave him. I know he's performed very well for these few years. I know he's a wonderful clubhouse guy, great team leader. But if you ask me next year, I'd rather have Brown than Diggs, and it ain't close for me. Maybe close, but not too close. All right. So, Bogman, let's talk about your hits here for 2022. Who are some of those names?
Yeah, I mean, it's just guys that I didn't flinch at drafting because of other guys around them. And it's Jaylen Waddle, probably number 1 for me. I had plenty of shares of Jaylen Waddle. I know everyone was scared when Tyreek Hill went there, and they said, well, this is a Niners type of offense that runs the ball a ton, and Tyreek is going to be the number 1. And, I don't know how much is going to be left there for Jaylen Waddle. And, a lot like Erickson said, just come on, man. These guys are super talented. And you're taking so much of the coverage. You're rolling towards Tyreek because he's so dangerous. That's going to leave Waddle one-on-one in plenty of situations. That's exactly what happened. Waddle had an outstanding year. And then just believing in rookie talent. It doesn't work every single time, and rookies are a risk. They just are. But Garrett Wilson going to New York, where the quarterback situation was a question. Everyone was high on Elijah Moore because he finished off the previous season strong. They had Breece Hall, they had Michael Carter. There's going to be another run first team with the same type of offense. And I just said, look, I think by the end of the year, Garrett Wilson is the number 1 there, maybe before then. And it didn't even take that long. No, I mean, it's like 3 weeks into the season. Garrett Wilson was
like 1 week with Joe Flacco throwing 75 balls, and that was enough.
Was the clear number 1, and is ascending right now. And it's just we saw him have an outstanding season with Joe Flacco and Mike White and Zach Wilson. What's going to happen when they get a capable quarterback in there, New York? He is going to be a very, very good wide receiver for a long time. So it's
a very desirable place too for a quarterback to go. I mean, you got a good defense. You've got
offensive line. Once they get healthy, they're good.
When the line is healthy, you're right. Good. Like that is a desirable situation. I think a head coach you'd like to play for.
QB's best friend, hand the ball to Breece Hall. So,
well, hopefully he's healthy enough to do that. But let me tell you, talk about learning stuff. We should all learn about the ACL injury returns too, because the Ravens guys, that was not it's just clear cut. They'll all be fine. That did not happen. So everybody who's looking ahead, and what's going to happen. Everyone's going to be hesitant on Breece Hall, hesitant on Javonte Williams, and then we're going to get closer and closer, and we're going to want them back, and we're going to force them up the draft board. And again, we got to be real careful with that. And Breece Hall is very special. I'm not going to pretend like he's not. Something to learn from. Okay, those were hits, definite hits. Let's talk about the misses. And this is an easy one, Erickson. This is shooting fish in a barrel for you. So let's talk about Courtland Sutton, shall we?
Oh, God. I never wanted to talk about him on this show, especially coming off a game where he finally caught a touchdown in week 18.
Helped nobody. Yeah.
I was giddy seeing that on Red Zone. Like, there he is. Touchdown, Courtland Sutton, second of the year. So obviously, Russell Wilson was obviously a disaster this year for all intents and purposes. The entire Broncos offense was historically bad. And Courtland Sutton, obviously,
it was better with Drew Lock.
Yeah, it was just it was a train wreck, and Nathaniel Hackett obviously played a big role in that. So I am a little more hopeful, even with these last 2 games we saw with Russell Wilson and these pass catchers. They much improvement, averaging north of well north of 20 points per game, which they barely did during the entire regular season. So I am hopeful that some of these guys bounce back. But I think the thing with Sutton was, I was overvaluing, how good he could be with Russell Wilson. The thing that's funny about it too is I was never really particularly in on Russell Wilson as like a fantasy guy for some reason, because I looked at the situation. I was like, you know what, like Russell Wilson's like situation really hasn't changed that much. Like if anything, comparing Metcalf and Lockett to Sutton and Judy, I felt that was like a downgrade, honestly, for Russell Wilson. So I think agree. That's something to kind of keep in mind, that I like Jalen Hurts a lot, which is why it was easy to also like AJ Brown a lot. But in this particular case, I wasn't super high on Russell Wilson, or I was, right around like ADP was. And that never really kind of struck in my mind, like, hey, is this a warning flag? And the other flag was Courtland Sutton, when he wasn't able to command targets last year when Jerry Jeudy was healthy. And that happened all season long. When Greg Dulcich and Jerry Jeudy were healthy, you saw Sutton's target share tank. And even in games where he was seeing a high target share, when Jeudy was missing games, when Dulcich was missing games, he had a north of 27% target share at times, 28% target share. He just wasn't doing anything with it. So I think I overvalued Sutton, at how talented he actually was. He's probably not, a top 12 wide receiver. He's probably not a real life top 20 wide receiver. And now I think that he has a place to be productive. He does have, touchdown equity because he's a big red zone receiver. But, all things being considered, I mean, Jerry Jeudy ran circles around him this year when Jeudy was healthy, which wasn't even half the time. So I know I'm going to want a lot of Jerry Jeudy next year, because I'm going to try and be buying back on this dip with the Denver Broncos. Because
I can't wait for every mock we do where you would take Jerry Jeudy and I go, I'm going to do that a lot. Oh, really? Oh, you want Jerry Jeudy now? Now you want?
Yeah. Well, I'm adjusting. Well, based on new information
you are adjusting.
I got this
I'm
year.
teasing because I love you. Here's a question for you, though, Erickson. Did we also make a mistake, and should we be very careful doing it next year, because there's going to be more quarterback movement, more head coaching changes, that we don't look to the Madden create your own roster situation. We go, oh, this looks really good on paper, and realize, hey, it takes a long time for new coach, new quarterback, new personnel, everybody to kind of gel together over the playbook and actually execute and play well. Should we be more cognizant and hesitant next year because of that? Because I think it's going to happen again this year, and I think it's a real trap.
I think so. And I think just being price sensitive, the fact that Courtland Sutton was going in like round 3 was just like absolutely, it was ludicrous when you look at it now. And it's some about another player that I missed on that I'll talk about here, which kind of ties into the same thing with Gabe Davis. Like Gabe Davis, I'll take the L on all about sure. Like he's on the Bills offense, and this guy scored 4 touchdowns in one game. Like he can't miss. Even though he's never commanded targets at any point in his NFL career, and that was, we saw it last week. The guy had 10 targets and caught 3 passes. Like he just hasn't been efficient consistently enough. And when it's only because if you put Gabe Davis on any other team, right, and we wouldn't even be like considering him like outside a sleeper. That's like your alarm bell to go off and be like, all right, so if he was on any other team, he would be like an 8th round pick, but because he's on the Bills, we're going to draft him in round 3, round 4. Like this,
50% of that hype was the 4 touchdown game against the Chiefs, man.
But
no, see, it wasn't for me because got Boggs. I was in on him going into last year's draft in 2021 because he had so many red zone opportunities. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a great week. And it ended up being a lot of Dawson Knox instead of the red zone in 2021. We got a lot of that. So I thought, okay, 2022, another year down the trough there for Josh Allen. He continues to, start to look elsewhere, really start to branch out. And I thought really a secondary wide receiver could be that thing. And it just did not happen. And to Erickson's point, he's giving you a lot of reasons why it didn't happen. Boggs, for you, who are some of the misses of 2022 for you?
Well, Sutton was also in there for me. And it's because look, Sutton coming out of college, at SMU, only spent the last 2 years of his career playing wideout. He started as a safety there. So this is a guy coming into the NFL that was still kind of learning the position. Yeah, he had a huge year, then tore his ACL, came back, had a pretty good season. And then this year, you're like, all right, well, now he gets a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's the clear number 1. Jeudy can't stay on the field. Like these are all dream scenarios for a guy that is ready to hit his peak in his career. And look, I wasn't knocking Russell Wilson at all. And I think as the industry goes and as just football goes, as we see Matt Stafford dropped into LA, wins the Super Bowl. We see Tom Brady dropped into Tampa Bay, wins the Super Bowl.
But here's the difference. The difference is Sean McVay was already there. The offense was installed. It was something he had to come in and just learn. It wasn't all new to everybody.
Well, it was the first time it was a new coach and there was like new quarter, like
new coach, new quarterback, like, new system, all at the same time. Right, exactly. McVay's established, then they tailor things to what Matthew Stafford likes, but the infrastructure is the same. And this was a team that went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, so they already had proven success within that system.
Right, and I understand that, but you see a Hall of Fame QB dropped into a situation that everyone says they're
you said
QB
it twice
away.
Now. You think he's a Hall of Famer?
Russell Wilson? Yes, I think Russell Wilson's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah, I do.
Wow.
So, I mean, you win a couple Super Bowls, you get in. That's pretty much the marker. So, I do think he's a Hall of Fame level QB. He will at least get votes, if not get in immediately. But I mean, you drop a guy like that into a situation like this, and we all thought that the O-line was the issue in Seattle. Everybody thought that. And by the way, it improved massively, which is, you get two tackles that can actually block in there and things become, you give Geno another Mississippi than Russell Wilson was getting last year. And all of a sudden you can throw to those wide receivers that are elite at getting open. Russell didn't have that. Nothing worked. His teammates didn't seem to like him. I mean, it was a disaster. So I'm not that surprised that Sutton moved down. I don't know, though. I think we're going to get the overcorrection with him, Erickson, and he's going to start looking like a deal at some point. Are you just bridge burned here? Are you done with him or what?
Oh, no. I think Sutton will be a value. And actually, the guy that's probably going to be the best value is going to be Tim Patrick. Because when he went down, that's when everything was going to crash and burn. Because he was the glue that kept this Broncos.
Tim Patrick, I would argue Javonte Williams was keeping this all together. That's my argument.
Tim Patrick, for the record, a lot of touchdowns next year.
Super Bowl, no plural for Russell Wilson.
Well,
he's
been to a couple.
In 20. He's been to a couple.
I understand.
I've been to a few too. Okay. I didn't play.
That's why you should go buy Tim Patrick in Dynasty. By the way.
Tim Patrick, there you go. Tim Patrick. All right, so Sutton definitely one for you. Who's another miss for you, Boggs?
I mean, the other big miss for me was Deebo. I still like Deebo going in, and I kind of ignored the injury history. I mean, I didn't expect for them to also trade for Christian McCaffrey, midway through the year or whatever. But I thought, okay, well, he got his contract, right? We have Trey Lance in here. This offense has changed so much from what we thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to be this RPO with Deebo in the backfield, slinging the Kittle, a lot of Trey Lance running around, Eli Mitchell getting in the mix as well. Kind of tricky, kind of a lot of motion and stuff like that. And then Lance went down, so we went to a different offense with Jimmy G, which was kind of the same. And then Jimmy G went down and they traded for CMC before that. So the offense just changed to be completely different than what I thought it was going to be. Now, Brock Purdy has played well. Maybe he's the guy moving forward. I think it depends on how the Niners do in the playoffs and stuff. But they traded a lot for Trey Lance. So, Deebo was a huge miss.
Someone might trade a lot for Trey Lance too. Someone else. I mean, look, Purdy at some point is going to be pressed to make a play or two in the playoffs. That's when I want to see how good Brock Purdy really is. That's going to be very telling. All right, let's get to the 2023 bowl predictions, the fun of the show. Everybody's got 4 here. Erickson, let's kick things off with you. Give me one of your 4 bowl predictions for 2023 when it comes to the wide receivers. Go.
I'm going with Garrett Wilson. He's going to finish the top 5 fantasy wide receiver.
And who's the quarterback?
Yeah, that was my question.
Oh, who's quarterback? Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr, one of those guys.
No, just one. Pick one. Jimmy Garoppolo. I like the Jimmy Garoppolo one. Screw you. Jimmy Garoppolo is the answer. All right, let's go to Bogman. Give me one of your bowl predictions for 2023.
Here it is. Jameson Williams finishes in the top 15. And this is, look, Amon-Ra St. Brown is everything you said he is, Erickson. He's outstanding. Jameson's better. I
love Jameson Williams.
I still think Jameson's a little bit better. And I mean, it's not going to happen again.
He's different too.
And they work together. It's going to be just like Jason Higgins, man. It's going to be just like Jason Higgins.
Very much.
They don't have Burrow though. Goff played very well, and I was very impressed with what he did. That's another.
Goff did go into Green Bay last night, get the job done, didn't he?
I mean, that's also a possibility for the Jets, would be Jared Goff if they want to go ahead and draft a QB in Detroit. They might not, but isn't he going to make like $8 billion this year or something. I don't know. They're going to have to restructure him at least. But Jameson, I mean, he flashed some big plays. I am ready for him to be an enormous part of this offense. And Jamal Williams had 17. He broke Barry Sanders' Lions touchdown record.
And I'm happy for him.
He's
so funny. And
he's so great.
He's so great. And
he went from crying to cutting a wrestling promo.
But his Key and Peele-esque, when you state your name and your school, that he did last night at the top of the show. I don't even know what he said. It was just hysterical. So good. It was like Scott Tracer.
That guy is so good. This offense is great. So I just, we're going to get a little more volume press towards Jameson, and he is one of those DeAndre Hopkins type top tier guys. That's my only issue with Amon-Ra at all. But Amon-Ra is still very, very good, and I probably would still rank him, if not as a wide receiver 1, right there, wide receiver 13, 14 in that range. But I think Williams has enough juice to finish top 15 this year.
All right. Number 2 for you, Erickson. This is going to be fun. I'm excited about this and what's going to lead to next.
All right, Deontay Johnson. He's going to score a touchdown next year. It's my bold prediction. Deontay Johnson. So for those that aren't familiar, Deontay Johnson broke the record for most targets, catches, receiving yards, etc., without a touchdown scored an entire season.
They got the 2-point conversion yesterday too.
He was just teasing us yesterday too. It's like, he goes down to like the 1 yard line.
Whose record was it that he broke? Do you remember?
It was like a running back. It was really weird. I looked it up earlier today.
It was someone from the 80s. They mentioned it on the broadcast yesterday. I can't remember who it was.
It was some running back that was involved in the passing game. It was very bizarre. I was trying to look to see how many touchdowns did they catch next year? But because he was a running back, it didn't really there was no similarities between the two. But look, Deontay Johnson, he's a target machine. And even with Ben Roethlisberger, we still saw him get the lion's share of targets in the Steelers offense. He was always horrible with Kenny Pickett. They just didn't have a good connection. Now, I think that can change going into next year. I still like George Pickens a lot, but I think George Pickens might actually be overvalued. And I think Deontay Johnson, people are just going to forget about him and the fact that, this guy had a 28% target share while George Pickens was on the field. So, yes, Pickens was more productive with his actual targets, but, if Kenny Pickett just tones in his accuracy a little bit more, I think Deontay Johnson is going to be a value because people are so sick of him. I can see it right now. This guy sucks. His yards per target was less than 6 yards. He's horrible. When all I see is this guy got 10 targets every single freaking week. He's good. So I think he's going to be a value.
It was actually from 1961, Raymond Berry, Colts Hall of Famer.
Was he a running back?
I believe, yes, from what it's saying here. So, Boggs, you've got a Pittsburgh Steeler prediction, too. What is it?
Pickens over Deontay Johnson. I mean, look, this one might just, and I only threw this in here because Erickson got to the sheet first, and I wanted to, have a little debate back and forth here with him. But look, in PPR leagues, this is real close. Probably Deontay. Like Erickson said, dude gets 10 targets a game. He's always open. You know what he is? He's pre-catch AJ Brown. He's pre-catch AJ Brown. So he gets the ball and he ain't going to do what AJ Brown does with it. He's not going to run over a bunch of dudes because
it's like flag football. You just pull his flag and he's down right there. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. He's tall and skinny. He's not going to be breaking a bunch of tackles and stuff. He needs to muscle up if he's going to do that. Pickens gets in the end zone. And once he starts to run a couple different routes, runs them cleaner, more efficient with Kenny Pickett being in there as well, that Pickett to Pickens might be huge moving next year. So I could see Pickens getting in the end zone, double digits here. Especially if I don't know how bad this Pat Freiermuth injury was yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw him go down. He was holding his knee and screaming. So I haven't gotten an update as of this morning, but if that is significant, take another target off the field for the Steelers and those guys. And you trade Chase Claypool too, right? So you got to get probably a tight end that's going to start now if Pat is going to miss a significant amount of time, and they still need a slot guy. So I just think Pickens is going to be peppered. I think DJ is as well. I think they're both going to be underrated because DJ didn't score any touchdowns, and no one likes the Steelers offense. And, they shouldn't. They had 12, 13 passing touchdowns this year. It was disgusting. Devontae Adams caught more touchdowns than the Steelers had this year, passing. it was gross, but it's going to get better. It got much better in the second half, as you saw from the Steelers record. And I think Pickens is going to get in the end zone a bunch next year. So I'm excited about him.
All right, Erickson, your number 3 prediction for 2023 wide receivers is?
Going with Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be wide receiver 1 in 2023. We saw both Kirk and Zay Jones ranked top 20 in red zone targets. Marvin Jones is gone. So this team is still going to operate with these 3 wide receivers on the field. And I just think that Calvin Ridley is by far the best player out of all 3. I know Ridley's obviously not played in a while, but I look, Hopkins missed a lot of time. When he came back, what happened? Oh, he was wide receiver 1. Like, I really think we're going to maybe overreact to, well, he's missed so much time.
I did to Hopkins this year for sure.
And and that's kind of why I don't want to be, I'd rather be over aggressive on Ridley, like coming back and being an alpha, especially with like Kirk and Zay Jones, who, look, they're good players, but they have really been more beta players in their careers. And I think there's a reason why they went out and got Calvin Ridley, because they're like, we need an alpha for Trevor Lawrence to get to the next level. And I think Ridley's going to help them get there. So I think he can be a wide receiver 1 in 2023.
Boggs, number 3, 2023 bold prediction for wide receivers.
Let's go with Drake London being drafted too high. I think that is going to be, and I love Drake London, don't get me wrong, but this is what we just talked about with Kansas City and Baltimore, 2 extremely different offenses that don't have to have a wide receiver number 1. And while Drake London is more talented than a lot of guys that are going to be going around him, who is throwing the football in 2023 for Atlanta? Is it
Lamar.
Desmond Ridder?
Lamar.
Dude, I thank
if it's
you.
Lamar,
I'm not kidding. That was my thought process. If I'm the Falcons, he fits perfectly.
Well, here's a question. If it's Lamar, is
Kyle
it wrong
Pitts.
to draft him high or no?
Kyle Pitts. That's who you want to draft high.
That's the answer.
If it's Lamar, because if you get Lamar, you have to have a specific offensive system. Everybody knows this. Right. If you watch the Ravens, they run the ball a million times.
Run the football.
And Atlanta likes to run the football.
Atlanta likes to run the football. They're built to run the
football.
Exactly.
That's what they do. That's my point of London being drafted too high, is that this team is going to still be a run first team. When you have Patterson, you have Tyler Algier, who's going to be their number 1 unless they go out and draft like Bijan or someone which would fit their system insanely, because they want to run the ball. And this is Arthur Smith being a very smart head coach. I know I complained about him a bunch because I didn't like the quarterback situation going on there. We've seen enough of Mariota. Give me something different. So, seeing Desmond Ridder at the end of the season was better, but I don't know if that's the guy. And they're still going to be a run-heavy team. Drake London was huge at the end. He finished very, very strong, and he was a rookie, and there was no Kyle Pitts, and Olamide Zaccheaus was their number 2 wide receiver, which I assume they're going to improve on in the offseason. So I just see this as Drake London finishing off the year well. He's very, very talented, but I don't know who the quarterback is. Kyle Pitts is going to be coming back. They're going to be a run-first offense, and they're probably going to add some wide receiver depth too. So I think, I still like London. I'm going to have him ranked fairly high, but I think he is going to be one of those preseason hype guys where the hype goes a little bit too far, like we were with Courtland Sutton this year.
All right, Erickson, your last wide receiver prediction for 2023.
Going with Jerry Jeudy. I think Jerry Jeudy's going to be a top 15 receiver. With Russell Wilson and Sean Payton as the head coach of the Denver Broncos.
I knew that was great. I knew it. It's the only way you could convince me that wasn't it.
Jeudy, last 6 games, he is 5th in receiving yards at 25% target share. And if you just look at him based on how many snaps he played, so no other player scored more fantasy points with a sub 75% route participation than Jerry Jeudy did this year. No other player. So based on when he was actually on the field, he was one of the most productive players on a per route basis. And that was within the context of this disaster offense that was the Denver Broncos. He overcame it. He had a career year, which is like something that should not be lost in this Denver Broncos season, that Jerry Jeudy had a career year in a season that the Denver Broncos don't ever want to remember for the entirety of the franchise. So
I know this, that you will be buying Pat Fitzmaurice and myself a whole lot of pizza.
Wait, you too? I thought it was just Pat.
No, it was the 2 of us. That was the 2 of me. Pat reminded me it was the 2 of us. I said,
me too. I get pizza too, right? How do I get pizza? I don't know.
We'll send you a pizza. Next year. All right, Boggs, finish us out here with their last bold prediction for 2023 wide receivers.
I mean, look, if Cooper Kupp starts falling because of the things that Erickson talked about, if Matt Stafford retires and the quarterback situation is rough and we're going to have a new coach and all that stuff, I do not care. If he falls in the end of the second, early third, I will own every share of Cooper Kupp. Please let him fall. That's what I know about 2023 for sure.
So many quarterback unknowns. Going to be a fun offseason just like last year. It's going to be a fun draft. Make sure you stick around for all of that coverage because we're going to be doing all the draft coverage, all the dynasty coverage. Bogman and Fitz will be back very soon to do the dynasty show too. That's going to happen any day now, I feel like. And of course, we're going to be doing fantasy shows. Still NFL talk 365 around these parts. So don't forget, we just stay tuned in, locked in. We got a lot more NFL to talk about, more fallout from the NFL season. And don't forget too about Betting Pros as well. Great content over there, including the Daily Juice. So subscribe wherever you get your pods. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Andrew Erickson and Scott Bogman, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.